everyone, and welcome to another Scots We Hae podcast. And I'm joined today by Leyla Josephine. Hello, Leyla.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. I'm very well. It's good to see you again. I was just saying, I think yours was the last podcast we recorded live before we all had to lock down.
I know, and we were in I think we were in the single end, the Southside Studios, which was freezing and really echoey, like the worst place to do a podcast.
I do remember it was freezing, that's right. But I'm just thinking how much things have changed since then. The world is a very, very different place.
And yeah, different and still changing every day.
I know, absolutely right. But we're going to talk about your new book, In Public, in Private, and also the current tour that you're on. But I thought before we started doing that, you'd maybe like to give us a reading from the book.
Yeah, sure. So I'm gonna do one of the first poems in the book, and it's called Being Scottish, and it was a commission from the Edinburgh International Book Festival during lockdown for this scheme called Live Literature Around the World. And it was, I don't know how you felt during COVID or how other writers or creatives felt during lockdown, but I went through phases of being like really creative, really proactive, and then times that I just could not do anything and I couldn't write and I had no ideas. And when this commission came to me, I mean, commissions don't come often, so you're like, that's great, yeah, in 3 months I will have a piece about what it means to be Scottish. But as the time went on, you know, it was 3 months to go, 2 months to go, 1 month to go, and I still hadn't written anything. And then it was 2 weeks to go, and I was like, right, I have to let them know. So I emailed them, and I was like, oh, I hadn't even started, and I was like, oh, I just don't really like what I've written, and I think you'd be better giving the opportunity to somebody else. And they just said, because they're so lovely and kind, they said, whatever you've got, just do that. And I was like, oh no. So I wrote something really fast, like a couple of nights before, and I was like, right, I'll have to do, like, it's just not perfect, it's fine. And then they sent back an email being like, well, you have to make a film with it as well. And I was like, oh my goodness. So I just recorded myself saying it to my camera as I am right now. And I was watching the event. So it's like all these poets and writers from across the world talking about their home identity. And another poet that was doing it for Scotland was Roseanne Watt. And Roseanne Watt, I don't know if you know Roseanne Watt, she's just an incredible poet, an incredible artist. And she was on just before me, and she had a drone over the snowy mountains of Shetland and she was like holding this burning bush, and she just did this beautiful poem. And I had submitted this and also was just sitting to my webcam. So while I read this to you, I want you just to imagine that this is what I came up with about what it means to be Scottish. But I think it's so bad that it's kind of good, and I think that that's what being Scottish is all about. So it's called Being Scottish. It's like reaching the last hurdle in an Olympic race only to realise that you can't be arsed. It's like forgetting to press the switch when putting your phone on the charge. It's like you are a bag of crisps and an elephant that lives downstairs keeps mistaking you for a seat. It's like an advert for toothpaste, but the model's got no teeth. It's a soft, malleable metal that needs heat to conduct. It's being clever, but knowing better than to act smart. It's shouting, it's shite being Scottish, into a mountainous abyss until a mountain looks down its nose and agrees with you. It's visiting the place that you grew up, which is now a car park for a B&Q. It's a buzzard on a lamppost putting up with concrete and change. It's where wildness meets a cage. It's like, this is the one that gets me every time. I can't believe this is me representing Scotland right now. It's like, you are a spotty bum cheek and someone keeps whipping you with a towel and you keep saying that it's funny even though it hurts and you want them to stop. It's coming to terms with what is and what will always be lost. It's where heat finds the moment, anger masks the sadness, and toast melts the butter. It's being a 1 pence piece dropped to the bottom of a fountain. It's reaching the last hurdle and forgetting why you're running.
Yeah, excellent. I think being a spotty bum cheat being whipped by a towel is about the best representation of Scotland I can think of.
Well, I'm glad there was a couple other poets, including Roseanne, to show that we are also very beautiful and have beautiful language and, you know, nature and all of that as well.
You've got to have all sides represented to make a clearer picture.
Exactly, exactly.
Well, thanks very much for that. And what can you tell us about the collection as a whole?
Well, do you know that way I'm so close to it, I don't know what it is anymore. But this is what I was aiming to do. I was aiming to explore kind of the relationship a poet has to, or the relationship a poem has between an inside world and an outside world, and you know, the poem acting as a gate between an inner life and an outer life. You know, you're writing something that lives within you, or something that you've observed and you want to put it out. So I was interested in that kind of exchange. And while I was writing it, you know, I write a lot of, I mean, you know, I work a lot with autobiographical material. And I think what I came to the conclusion with is that even though I'm always working with autobiographical material, you know, I'm always editing it in a way. I'm always making it something to be packaged and shown. So I kind of came to the conclusion that I'm not sure you ever actually can share your private life, because your private life is so nuanced and so intimate and so ever changing, and that's the thing about writing a poem, is that it's so permanent. And you know, that's a challenge that I was really thinking about while I was writing this collection. So I feel like people are going to feel like they're reading my secrets, but really there is always a sense of them being edited for the reader. You know, it's for the reader, which is, you know, it's just an interesting thing to be playing with. And I feel like I could talk about that as a concept forever, but whether I've reached it in the book, I'm not sure. I think I've thrown a lot at the wall, and I'll let the readers decide what they take from it. But
have you always, because it's an interesting idea that poets and a lot of artists do, is they're offering part of themselves up for public reaction, and that seems like quite a scary thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, totally. And I think I'm getting better at knowing what I'm ready to share and what I'm not. Like, there's some poems in the book that I just didn't feel ready to share, so they've gone back in the library. And yeah, it's very strange when people think that they know you, because you know, you've got such an array of autobiographical material, but actually, you know, it's never, you can never capture a human existence within a piece of art form, but you're hoping, the hope is that people have felt something similar, so then they can do the same interrogation inside themselves. So that's really what it's about, I think. And yeah, it is scary for sure, but I think I'm getting better at now being like, whatever people's reaction is their reaction, and that is not anything to do with me, actually. So as long as I feel strong enough to be talking about what I'm talking about, then it doesn't really matter what the other person's understanding is, really.
But is there a difference then? Is it one thing writing it down for a book where people will go and read it in private and react to it, you know, in private, and then, as you're doing at the moment, taking it on tour and doing it publicly?
Yeah, it's really different. And I come from a performance poetry background, so coming to the page was like a very different task for me. It was very different in lots of ways, but one of the ways that's the most challenging is that you really, I mean, you never have control, like, of what people will take from your work, but you have even less control about how people will read it. So you want them to be reading it in bed on a Sunday morning with a cup of tea in the best mood ever, ready to take on whatever is in the book. But in reality, quite a lot of people will read one poem and go, nah, not for me. Another person will go, oh, well, you know, my kids are screaming and the dog's just shat on the carpet or whatever. I don't have time to read about this person who thinks she's got a problem. And then there's other people that will get like loads from it, and I think when you're performing, you have a sense of control, because everyone in the room knows what they're buying into. They're all buying into the same space, the same time, and you me as a performer, I am able, and I know it sounds bad, but I'm able to manipulate people to make them feel the way that I want them to feel, by my voice, by the way I stand, by what I do with my face, by all of these things, because that's my job as a performer. So it doesn't always work. Of course not, it doesn't always work. But you do have a sense of control in the space. Whereas with a book, you have no control. You're just all, it's like you have to have faith. you have to have faith that all the work that you've put into it is somehow going to reach people, and whether it will or not is faith. I don't know. So it's very different, and it's a different it's a different framing, it's a different form. Obviously it's on the page, so you know, I loved figuring out what I wanted things to look like.
Yeah.
And you know, I was very scared about doing that jump from performance to academic or to page, because you know, I always felt like the page wasn't for me, that it wasn't a space that I could occupy, because I'm dyslexic, because I'm not trained as a poet. But trained, that's my performance coming. I've not never been educated as a poet. So I think like that was a hurdle I had to get over and go, no, this blank page, this bookshelf, this is also a space that I can occupy. So that was, yeah, it was really different.
That's really interesting to hear, because having spoken to a lot of poets over the years, I think the poet is more worried about then giving a performance of their work. A lot of them really hate it. You know, they it exists on the page and that's enough. But to hear the opposite of that, you've got a performer who suddenly has to think, how is this going to appear on the page, and all of those things that you perhaps wouldn't have thought of before.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I think it's just like, I think it's all to do with like spaces that you have occupied for your life, or you've been taught that spaces for you. Like as a dyslexic, you know, I really struggled. Like I always, you know, I read when I was younger, which was really useful. And you know, my mum encouraged me to read. But you know, there was a long time through school and all of that I felt really stupid, and I felt like I didn't get things, I didn't understand things. And that really pushed me into a corner of like, oh, that's not for me.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, claiming that space, and I think and I think it's to do with like taste as well. So when I first started doing poetry, I didn't read poems like at all. Like I wasn't interested. I just watched it on YouTube, and I just went to loads of gigs and all of this kind of stuff. But then, like, you know, when I started writing for the page, and a bit before that as well, I just became obsessed with reading poetry, and just realizing that I had so much to learn, and that there were so many good things out there. And actually it was about figuring out what my taste was. And I think that that's the issue, is that people forget that taste is integral to like what you want to consume. And I think, you know, if someone's given a poetry book and they're like, read this, and or at school or whatever, and they're like, I don't like this, and then all of a sudden they're like, I don't like poetry. And it's like, it's like we have genres, which I think people don't understand. And so I think when I started to realize that I was allowed to dislike things, and I was allowed to not understand things, and be like, oh well, you know what, like it's not for me, like this is my taste. That really helped me, and that really made me feel able to do what I do now. And there was poets that I read and I was like, oh, that's what I can do that. And that was really amazing, for sure.
Yeah, and that's interesting to hear. I'm just thinking about being taught Sunset Song at school, and guys in the class going, this is rubbish, Scottish books are rubbish. You know, that was the jump. It was like that.
Yeah. I mean, Robert, I literally would rather bang my head off a wall than listen to Robert Burns. Like, genuinely, like, no. But give me Billy Letford, love it. Like, so it's like, these are two, like, they have similar themes, but they write in such different ways. Obviously, there's like hundreds of years between them as well. But like, it's just, we need to just, I suppose if there's a way that we could just feed people stuff in schools that we know that they'll like, rather than just stick to all this traditional stuff. It's just blah.
Well, are you still doing the schools writer for the Edinburgh Book Festival?
I'm not. Somebody else is taking that job over now, but I did it from 2020 to 2022. Yes, I think I finished at Christmas last year, sorry, so 2021. So I did it for 2 years and it was amazing. But I teach a lot. I love teaching.
So, but that's then maybe you're the perfect person to think how you do change that, how you do get people interested at school level.
Yeah, I mean, I don't do so much of what I'm encouraging people to read, but I definitely love giving people space to write whatever they want to write. And I think that's something that I really advocate for, is that everyone is a writer. Everyone should have access to speaking their opinion, whether that's about their favorite food, a band that they like, or football, or whatever, or even when they want to write really aggressive rap songs, like that's fine. Like, but as long as people are writing something that they can feel value from, that is something that I'm really, really passionate about. And also having space, something that I think the education system has got so wrong on every single level, is that there is no space for failure. And I think that is no way to learn. It's no way to be creative. It's no way to learn. And actually failing, you should be failing constantly, because it means that you're playing and experimenting and figuring things out. And that's something that is like a core value to me. So whenever I go into any workshop, I always try and make space for failure and play. And that's an exercise. I've got some exercises that I do that everyone will fail at. And that's a really good way to start a session, because it means that everyone's already failed and realized that it's not a big deal. But that's what the education system gets really wrong, I think. But in terms of reading, I'm not sure how you would do that. I suppose it just takes a really engaged teacher. And I think that teachers are very stretched. So librarians are key. Every school that I've worked in, not all of them, but a lot of librarians are very, very, very good at getting to know people and making really safe spaces. Shout out to Pauline at Clydebank High. She's just like the most amazing librarian, and Joe Kelly in Dublin. There's so many librarians that I've met, that I've worked with, that are just like the most incredible people and never thanked, like ever. And just like, I actually get quite emotional talking about them, because I know that so many libraries they're only getting librarians like once or twice a week now. And it's a shame.
I think that was one of the things that seemed to focus people over lockdown, was when libraries were closed. People kind of realized, one, they're not just for going and picking up books. There's all sorts of, functions that they have, and that they were hugely important.
Yeah, so important. Just a space that you can go in and you don't have to spend money.
Yeah, I know.
Like you got churches and libraries, like nothing else. Everywhere else you have to pay money.
Yeah, and that's a good point. So you are on tour at the moment. How's it going?
Yeah, good. Well, I'm at home just now. It's very hard to get gigs back to back. So I've been in Bristol, Cheltenham, Sheffield, and Leeds, and it's nice because I'm everything that I'm going into is like a different setup, so they're never always the same. And what I love is some of them have support acts, some of them have like open mics beforehand. So I really like getting to know the city through their support acts and like through their poetry. It's really interesting. And everyone has every city has a bit of a different character, which is quite cool.
And I take it it's just great being on stage again after a couple of years of not being.
Oh, it's so good. It's just like, I think I'm very different from before COVID. I think I used to get really nervous and I wanted it to be perfect every time. And I felt sometimes so exposed, and like I would come off stage and I would just have hated every moment of it. Really? And it's so weird. And now it feels like a total privilege. And I think it's really, I'm different now. I feel differently about it. Whereas before it felt, if there was only like 5 people in the audience, it'd be like, oh, only 5 people here, they hate me. And then like there's 5 people in the audience, like wow, 5 people, that's great. Like it's or maybe not as great, but I go, well, it's going to be so intimate and like really connect with people, and you know, like it's I feel lighter. I feel lighter about the whole thing.
And you released a live album as well, which was an interesting thing to do.
Yeah, so that was, when was that? That was January 2020. So I think that was probably just after we'd spoken.
Yeah.
And that, yeah, that was at the Hug and Pint in January. It was an alternative Burns night where I booked loads of amazing women poets, and yeah, we recorded it live, which was terrifying and fun, and I only listened to it once because I can't stand the sound of my own voice, so I think it's good.
People can still get it. It's available on Bandcamp and
yeah, on Spotify, Apple Music. I get a little notification telling me if people listened that week. It's like quite a nice little thing. I just became quite like aware that as a performance poet at that point, I'd been performing for 10 years, and I didn't have that much documentation of like what I did. And I think that I could have gone into a studio and recorded it, but actually it was much more true to my practice to have a live audience there. So yeah, but that was one of the gigs that went really well, but I came off stage feeling like, oh, I really didn't enjoy that. I felt too exposed. So it's just interesting. I think if I did it now, it would be like so different, you know. I'd be on, and I think my King Tut's gig is going to be very similar to that, you know, home crowd. Yeah, I think it's going to be really fun.
But I think it makes perfect sense to have the album with the audience there as well, because you know that's what I think of with your stuff, is that it's meant for an audience on the whole. I think that's. Would you give us another reading from the book?
Yeah, of course. Okay, so the next one I'm going to do, actually no one's ever heard this before, so total exclusive. But I thought it might be good to talk about, yeah, that idea of trying to reach through a page to a reader. And it's called Out of Reach, which is also a Gabrielle song, but it's in response to that. I have an urge to reach out and grab the stranger's hand at the next table. Maybe it's the indie playlist that's playing in this cafe, or how the trees from the park cut the light that skims the table, or that I'm hungover and I miss you. I have an urge to fill my house with plants, so I'm not the only breathing thing. I have the urge to shave my head so more people ask me why I have a shaved head. I have an urge to become TikTok famous. I write a poem instead, because a poem is essentially a classy version of a social media post, right? Reader, are you here with me? Can you give me a sign? Does a poem have a skin you can peel? Are we dancing together inside it? If you could grab my hand, would you? Or are we always just out of reach? A page thin distance, a world away, the poem always hovering at the doorway of itself, a modified architecture of reality, carefully edited, a substandard shadow of what I'm trying to show you. I'm asking because the way this afternoon light hits the table is making me so lonely. The way it pirouettes just to break itself into pieces makes me think that maybe the light is lonely too. So I'll keep trying. Reader, I'll go on.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. So the last time we spoke, you were about to do Daddy Drag, which was a very personal show, as you say, you're giving us personal. What was the response to that? Because I saw it and it was a fantastic show. Yeah,
so I mean, so all I managed to do was the Fringe and then the Tron and then COVID hit.
Right.
Yeah, it did well. Like, I think people enjoyed it, and it was a mad thing to do. Maybe up there with the craziest. You know, now that I'm dating again, I do think like, oh, when is the time do I talk about the fact that I did a show for a month dressed up as my dad. Like, when do I go there? But I love that show, but it was very hard to do something so personal for such a long time. And it made me rethink, you know, ever going that deep ever again for anything. And I think the painful thing about it is what we were talking about earlier, about how you can never capture a person in a show or a thing. And, you know, you start this is John Cooper Clarke actually told me this. You need to be careful when you're making art, because sometimes you replace things with the art. And like, sometimes I feel worried that I replaced my dad with the caricature of my dad. So I think you've got to be careful. And that's one of the reasons that I really don't write about people that often. I find it very, very hard to capture people. And I find it very painful that I can never quite capture a person. And there's some writers that manage to do it so well. And you know, I really admire them. Or like, you know, it must be the same for a painter trying to do a portrait, you know, like it's very, very hard to capture these real things. And that's the painful thing. And I was in pain during that show. I was really struggling with the art I'd made, and I was really ready when COVID hit to put it to bed, and I threw out everything. And somebody asked me not that long ago to do the show again, and I was like, it's in the skip, it's done. And it just has to exist, you know, in another place now, wherever art goes when it's not seen anymore, it lives there.
That's so you threw everything out, the costume, the beard, the whole lot.
I actually kept the fat suit. That's the only thing I kept. I've got the fat suit because I thought, you know, I could buy another suit, but I couldn't get a belly, so because my belly was made for me. So
yeah. And you mentioned there John Cooper Clarke. Can you toured with John Cooper Clarke?
Yeah, that was just before COVID actually, and that was a great little stint of gigs. Really fun.
I'm a huge fan of his. Quite jealous of you getting to see him every night, I guess.
Yeah, and like hang out with them and get a chat. I genuinely think he's so airy-fairy, he might not even remember me, even though we hung out for like 10 days. But yeah, he just hearing some of his chat. The coolest thing that happened at one point, he was like, "Oh, you really, really remind me of a friend." And I was like, "All right, okay, you know, what's she like?" And she was, "Oh, she's quite tough, and you know, you just look like her, and you've got the same sort of thing. Her name's Chrissy." And then he turned to his manager and he's like, "Johnny, do you not think that she reminds you of Chrissy?" And he was like, "Yeah." And then I was like, "Chrissy Hines?" And then she was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "No way, that's so cool."
Yeah, so, that's one to keep telling, definitely.
I know. So I was like really chuffed with that, and just like hearing his old stories, and also, yeah, him talking about writing was really interesting as well. It made me think differently, you know, him trying to capture. He said that, you know, he sometimes felt like he was taken out of experiences because you're thinking about how to write about them.
Right.
And I think that that's very true as a writer, is that you write twice. I actually have a poem about John Cooper Clarke. It's really short.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So it's called, no one's ever heard this one either. The book only got posted out yesterday. I don't know. Here it is. Is it here? Yeah. So when I was on tour with John Cooper Clarke, I wrote down a list of all the things that were on his rider.
Right.
And this is the what was on his rider. I feel bad, like, because I did ask permission, but they never got back to me. So anyway, this is John Cooper Clarke's rider. 10 bottles of water, a box of Yorkshire tea, a pint of semi-skimmed milk, a score of heroin not taken, a family pack of mini rolls, portrait of a lady aftershave, the smell of it in the corridor, on my clothes after a hug, a multi-pack of McCoy's crisps, a pair of jet black Ray-Bans, 1 pack of Lucky Strike, nostalgia, 2 chicken sandwiches, the sickness that comes from writing, the loneliness of living twice, black hair dye, a bottle of gin, a single lemon, ice, and wings. The heroin's not true, obviously, but artistic license.
Of course.
But yeah, so that is John Cooper's Clark's rider. The wings is also not true. What else is not true?
It wouldn't surprise me.
The black hair dye and the Ray-Bans. But everything else is true. 2 chicken sandwiches, pack of mini rolls.
So we spoke a little bit about doing theatre. Have you got more theatre coming up?
No theatre coming up. I'm working a lot in film at the moment.
All right.
Which is really fun. My short film Groom has just been nominated for a Scottish BAFTA, so buzzing about that. So that's on later in the month. And we've just done London Film Festival with it and various other festivals. So yeah, I've been really enjoying working in film. That's a new form, new medium. That was made March 2021, so depth of COVID. And yeah, just moving away from performing in theatre myself. Like, I developed a play with the National Theatre of Scotland called, I can't tell you the name, never mind. And I wasn't in that. I worked with 2 actors, and it was totally fictional, which was really fun space for me to play in, actually, because it really gave me those boundaries that Daddy Drag didn't give me. And then, you know, that might potentially turn into a film, or it might, you know, do some, I'm not sure. I have been thinking about maybe putting it out to some theatres, but I've just really been enjoying doing the poetry for the last year. It's really it's been amazing. But yeah, so no performing in theatre anytime soon, unless an idea came up that I was like, no, I have to be in it. It's right. My show.
That writing for other people kind of appeals, doing, you know, play it right.
Yeah.
For people, yeah. And with film, is that something? Are you in the film, or are you
not in the film? No, it's a completely fictional. It's about a young girl who goes for work experience at a nail salon, and it's actually on this weekend in Glasgow at the Alchemy Experiment as part of World of Film Festival. Right. But yeah, and then I'm hoping it'll be online at some point on some sort of medium in the next few months, maybe like towards the spring next year, just because it's still doing festivals, so you can't really post online while it's still doing festivals.
And have you been to any live stuff yourself with other people? Have you managed to do that, or have you been too busy?
What do you mean, like going to see stuff?
Yeah.
Well, I'm actually going to see 549, the Spanish Civil War by Wonderfuls tomorrow, which is quite exciting. Yeah. And I also saw Hang, the Tron, not that long ago, which was good. And then I'm going to see Maggie Rogers tonight, which I'm really looking forward to. The Carling Academy. It's not the Carling Academy. I've been calling it the Carling Academy for the last 25 years. It's the O2, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what it's called.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll be at Push the Boat Out this weekend because I'm launching on Sunday, but I'm hoping to see some stuff there as well. So I have been getting out, I have been seeing stuff, I have been spending a lot of time reading poetry and going to the cinema, but yeah, I should be going to see more stuff for sure. It's just they're saying that, you know, theatre audiences are down by like 20% across the board. It's really bad. It's a shame. I'm actually like amazed that the people still going. So a lot of shows at the Fringe, and that would be the first time that I was seeing like a lot of stuff back to back since COVID. And I found I wasn't moved that much, and I don't know if it was just because I wasn't used to it, or it was just like new to me, or I don't know. I saw Medea was great by the National Theatre of Scotland.
Edinburgh, I thought Edinburgh was fairly busy. You know, it was kind of back. It seemed to me. I went to some sold out things, which I hadn't seen otherwise.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like for me, like having done the Fringe for so long, well, I've not done it for so long, I've done it twice, but it felt like so long. I feel like it's toxic, and I feel like there's so many amazing things about it, but it is so hard, and people just get broken there. And and also the accommodation is so expensive. The city is just like, the waste is just unbelievable. And it's like, there's so many amazing things about it. But for me, like, I thought there would be an opportunity for things to change a little bit. And it just doesn't feel like things have changed at all.
Yeah, I agree. If anything else, it's kind of doubled down on the way
Yeah.
that it is, and it's more expensive and it's tougher than ever, it seems to me.
I know, and then the film festival moved to be at the same time as the Fringe, which just felt like, you know, so silly, because there's just not more accommodation, more people can't be there. It's just so saturated. And I also, in terms of poetry, it's really frustrating because you get all these English nights that come up and they do these big showcases, but they don't bring in any local talent. So it's just like, and it's the same for comedy as well. You just get, you know, it just becomes another London, really. And that is really frustrating, and that really annoys me. But at the same time, I mean, the energy is amazing, isn't it? I mean, to have the biggest theatre festival on your doorstep is, I mean, it's amazing. But it's just like, how do we, you know, manage it? Because I didn't even get to see anything at the book festival this year because I was too busy at the film festival, and I was trying to see shows. And it's just like, you know, if all these festivals were on at different times, I would go to every single one individually. But because they're all at the same time, I'm like fried.
No, absolutely. Oh, talking of books, what's the best place for people to get yours?
So if you can get it from my website, I get more money for that way. Just to be totally transparent. So that's www.leylajosephine.co.uk/shop. But you can also get it from the Burning Eye Books website. And you can also get it from Waterstones, which is, I mean, a dream come true. And you can also get it from any events that you come and see me on my tour, which I'm sure you all will. And also, yeah, I think you can get it at like indie bookshops as well, but I'm just not exactly sure. I couldn't confirm exactly where I would have them. I'm imagining all the big players in Edinburgh and Glasgow will have them. But I would love to see people at the gigs, so please do.
Get a signed copy.
Yeah, and if you do want a signed copy or like a message, if you're buying it for a Christmas present or whatever, just let me know. I mean, I'm the only person running all my socials and my emails, so you can get me there for sure, and I'll write a wee note in.
Cool. We'll put links to all of those when the podcast goes out. Before we let you go, could you read us one more poem? Would that be okay?
Yeah, of course. So this poem people might have heard before, actually, because it's a bit of it's an oldie, but it's a goodie. And so I live in Prestwick, which everyone knows is, well, all Scottish people know that it's the only place that Elvis ever went to in the UK. And well, maybe not all Scottish people know that, but people in England don't know that, so I'm always telling people that. And I look out directly to the runway, and I have a lot of plane watchers that sit outside my house. And I've now got a new hobby of that. I'm a plane watcher, so I keep an eye on them while they keep an eye on the planes. But another thing that happens a lot where I live, I think because it's so open, you know, it's the runway and then it's the sea, so it's like there's no buildings kind of taking up any of the sky, so I see a lot of birds flying, and I noticed that they love flying on windy days, and it's a really windy day today, so they're out in their masses. So this is called Questions I Have for Birds. Where do you go at night? How do you hear without any ears? Does it hurt when you lose a feather? Are you friends with one another? You know the worms that you strangle out of the earth like screaming red newborns? Do you chew them or gobble them whole? I've never seen a glint of a tooth, so I imagine that's how it works. Is it like swallowing a piece of spaghetti? Is it like sucking your tongue to the spine? Could you confirm? Can you feel them squirm in your belly like eels until the acid melts them to mush? I see you on windy days, flying harder and for longer. Is there more joy in that kind of weather? Gusty and unpredictable, does it make you feel invincible? I see how you dip and glide, a moment of clarity, a break from the monotony of a daily bird routine. What does that feel like? If you had time to explain, I'd love to know. Is it like a child slapping their palms down on the ocean top, or lesbians kissing hard on the street? How a violin string feels when it's plucked? Does it make you vibrate? An old man shouting checkmate in a park with a board on a bench? Pardon the pun, but is it like a duck to water? Is it like coming up on a dance floor, the first taste of tea off a mother's pinky? What is the human version of flying when it's windy? Does it feel like your purpose? Do you get lost in it? Birds, tell me what I can do. I want to have those moments always, on the wind, on the surf, on the nose, on the breeze, the clarity, the coming together. That's what life is for, maybe. Sorry, I brought it back to myself again. So selfish of me. Now do say, how do you stand on such small feet? Do you have a favourite seed? How do you know what song to sing?
Thanks so much.
No
And
worries.
thanks so much for taking the time to have a chat with me, and all the best with the book.
Sorry, I shouldn't have had a big gulp of tea when you said that there. Silence. No, thank you, Alistair, and thank you so much for making space for all us artists to come talk about our work, because we love to do it, and it's just great that you are able to facilitate that and research so well and ask such lovely questions. So you've really filled up my day today, so thank you so much.
It's always a pleasure.
No
And
worries.
we'll be back soon with someone completely different.